Relationship expert, mediator, and founder of the Creative Relationship Center, and sponsored by the Financial Planning Center. If you would like to participate on today's program, call now, 803-1520. That's 803-1520.
Good morning and welcome back to All About Love, where we run every Sunday from 11 to 12. And we focus on couples, love, divorce, and everything in between. I'm Wendy Pegan, relationship coach, expert, and mediator, and founder of the Creative Relationship Center, where we help you in all areas of life. You know, all of us are not lucky enough to be born into families where we have great role models as relationships. And for those of us who are not as lucky, there is Creative Relationship out there for you to help you weed out the serious issues and problems you may be facing as a couple, to help you move your relationship from good to great. And if it's too late, our team of experts are there to help you do your part civilly and graciously in divorce in a way that is helpful for your children. And today we have some of those team members with us. Joining us today is Timothy Sobolewski, who is the owner and founder of the Financial Planning Center and our money guy. He's going to be talking with us today on the financial implications of cohabitation versus marriage. And unfortunately, he's sick today, but he's pulled himself in. I'm so sorry you're sick, Tim, but thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'll try to keep the coughing to a minimum.
Okay, move the other way in case you cough. Also with us today is Christina Shine, who is a divorce attorney and or a matrimonial attorney and a mediator. And interesting about Christina, we have spent some time together, working together on some divorces, and she's been a law guardian for some of my families. But she has also been married 18 years. Unlike some of the rest of us, she's been married only once, which speaks very firmly for her as an advocate for marriage. So, Christina, welcome.
Thank you, Wendy.
And
Thank you for
because you
having me.
haven't been here before, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. As Wendy said, I'm a little bit of an oddball. I'm a matrimonial attorney who's never been divorced. I've been married to the same person for 18 years. I've been an attorney since 1988. When I first became an attorney, there was no such thing as mediation, so my initial background was in litigation, which I did until 1996 when mediation came to Western New York. I had to go to Rochester to obtain the training, but I did. And I brought it back to Buffalo and made mediation a part of my practice, which it's been ever since. I'm located in Williamsville in the Village, and my practice focuses on matrimonial and family law, both mediation and litigation, and also a little bit of collaborative process, which we can talk about at a later date.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Also, I would like to thank our producer, Jim, who is just a wonderful guy and a lot of fun to be with. And Jim, jump in at any time if you would like today. And our two researchers and students, Courtney Kruger and Caitlin Hager, thank you guys for coming in. And again, you can join it at any time because we love to hear your opinions. We're going to be talking today about cohabitation. And interestingly enough, as we were going through the studies, we were finding that there seems to be no positive effects from cohabitation. And we'd like to discuss cohabitation versus marriage because unfortunately, 48% of studies are telling us that 48% of women, and I am assuming men, for their first unions are moving in together with no wedding vows. And unfortunately, out of that percentage, a pretty high percentage is also getting, even though they're getting married, they're also getting divorced. And Christina, when we were talking earlier, you were mentioning that you are not seeing a decrease in the number of divorces.
No, I'm not. And so it leads me to wonder why the cohabitation. I know that there's a belief among certain people that you cohabit first with your prospective spouse to make sure that the relationship is going to work. And I have some friends who have actually said that to me who have perhaps done that. And their rationale was we wanted to make sure this relationship was going to last, so we didn't want to rush into marriage. But if statistically the rate of divorce is not going down while the rate of cohabitation is going up, what's really happening?
That's a good question. It's a good question because we want to know are people using this, do you think, as a means of just trying to figure out whether or not they are going to be good partners as roommates, or are they looking for lifelong partnerships? And do you think that there's a difference between how people are looking at this when they're first moving in together? Is this kind of the thing to do? I think this is becoming the new norm. And for a lot of women, usually between the ages of 25 and 30, which is the group that seems to be the most affected, it does seem to be the new norm.
Unfortunately, I think it's part of the whole cultural shift that we're living through, that what was traditionally accepted is now kind of poo-pooed. It's old-fashioned. It doesn't work. It doesn't connect with younger generations. So I think that people think it's just okay to move in together, and they can devise their own terms of what a commitment is and what a commitment means and what is stability, what isn't stability. But I don't know what advantages they're really getting out of cohabitation other than the ability to more readily leave the relationship without the legal ramifications that they would have to live through if they actually formalize the relationship by marrying each other.
So what you're saying is if they have a legal document that says that they're married, you think they're more likely to battle out some of those small things like leaving the cap off the toothpaste or putting the toilet seat up or down, is that they might fight those out better if they have a legal document that's holding them together.
That's my opinion, and everything that I'm saying is really anecdotal based on my experience and clients that I've represented. But I think that there's more effort put into a relationship, perhaps, if you've gone to the effort, the time, and the planning, really, to meet somebody, have a relationship with that person, and think in terms of lifetime, as opposed to this is what's working for me now. Mm-hmm. I'm in this relationship now, and if it doesn't work at some point in the future, there's nothing binding me to remain in this relationship.
I've often said that with a lot of the clients that I've worked with over the years, I have found that they have invested a lot more time in the actual planning of the wedding, but not the planning of the marriage.
Yes, the bridezilla.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, and anything that could go wrong will go wrong.
Yes.
Usually on the wedding day. So, which brings us back to some of those emotional connections that, and maybe even spiritual connections that couples need to feel before they make that physical connection of whether they cohabitate or whether they get married. And if you can get through some of those smaller things, that when the big things in life happen, and they will always happen, that there's going to be more of a glue that's going to connect the two of you so that you don't fall apart, whether you're cohabitating or whether you're physically married.
I think so. And I think what that maybe gets to is that there seems to be an acceptance in society now that you meet somebody, you date them a week, maybe a month, and before you know it, you're living together, as opposed to courting, which I know is a very old-fashioned term. But,
I like it, though.
But I like it. I see that as...
It kind of ages us, doesn't it?
Well, you know what, though? But I see that as an opportunity to really meet the other person's family, get to know the other person, see the person both in good times and in bad, good situations, difficult situations. Because when you only wait a matter of a month or a couple of months and then you live together, mm-hmm. you really haven't had an opportunity to experience that person. And you usually put your best foot forward when you're brand new in a relationship.
Oh, without a doubt.
So you think
the honeymoon phase.
Right. You think that person's wonderful. But you really need to see that person in a stressful, bad situation to really get a feeling for who he or she is.
That's
because
correct.
As someone very wise and close to me once said, it's very easy to be nice when everything is going well. Mm-hmm. What you really need to see on how you judge a person is how does that person react in stressful situations.
And to be able to have those bad moods and not take it personally.
Exactly.
I think that's pretty typical for a lot of our couples. Tim, let's talk about some of the financial ramifications that couples may face if they're cohabitating versus getting married. Do you find in your practice that you see couples who are thinking about living together first? And when I say thinking about, I mean they haven't actually done it yet. They're thinking about cohabitating, and they want to talk about what are some of the financial issues that they have to take a look at. Is that something you see in your practice?
Well, I do. Most often I see couples that are already together, but sometimes couples that are on their way to coming together. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a misconception that if they don't get married, that they don't have any financial liabilities to each other, and that's not always the case. That, as Christina says, it's easier to unwind it if you haven't been married legally. But they need to face a lot of the same issues that that a married couple does. And how do you arrange the household finances? Who pays for what? Are there 3 accounts, 2 accounts, 1 account? How do you segregate what each partner puts into that joint account from their income and so forth? So, they're looking at a lot of the same issues. I think that they're taking on, in some cases, as much risk without any of the legal protections of marriage.
Okay, yeah, that's all really good stuff. We're going to talk more about the ramifications and the legal issues regarding some of the finances that you were talking about in a minute. We're going to break now, but I'm going to encourage the audience to call in at 803-1520 with your questions and comments about cohabitation versus marriage, or as a prelude to marriage. Also, feel free to visit us on our website, which is creativerelationshipcenter.com, or our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Creative Relationship Center for information on successful couples and additional forum discussion living together before or in place of getting married. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Wendy Pegan, host of All About Love here on KB Radio and founder of Creative Relationship Center. If you've been thinking to yourself, he's changed, or she's not as loving as she used to be to me, or we don't have anything in common anymore, then consider making an appointment at Creative Relationship Center. At Creative Relationship Center, we have an association of professionals in the fields of counseling, legal, and financial planning. We offer couples counseling, coaching, mediation, workshops, and classes for adults at all levels of commitment, from pre-marriage through post-marriage. Creative Relationship Center can help your family stay together. Or if you've already decided to separate, we can help mediate your differences civilly without the major expense of attorneys or stress of going to court. Consider having the relationship you've always wanted. Consider Creative Relationship Center. To learn more about our couples college, couples retreats, divorce mediation, and many other services available, go to creativerelationshipcenter.com. That's creativerelationshipcenter.com.
Do you have problems with issues like anxiety, stress management, relationships, or trauma, but want to go beyond pharmaceutical fixes? Then turn to Western New York Holistic Counseling. Leslie Martin is a licensed mental health counselor who takes a whole-person approach to therapy. She works with adults, adolescents, and families and draws on your strengths, positive qualities, and inner resilience. This holistic approach helps you feel better, get back on track, and get the anxiety under control so you can live the kind of life you want to live. Learn more at WNYHolisticCounseling.com. That's WNYHolisticCounseling.com. Do you need help planning your retirement? Is your household budget something you just don't want to look at? Then maybe it's time to make an appointment with the Financial Planning Center to develop a personalized professional financial plan. The Financial Planning Center can help with financial goals and budgets of any size. If you're a middle-class investor, you will be especially happy because there are no account minimums and they take no commissions on investments. And if that's not enough, your first visit to the Financial Planning Center is absolutely free. Call 240-4304 today. That's 240-4304 for the Financial Planning Center.
You're listening to All About Love with Wendy Pegan. Call now, 803-1520. That's 803-1520.
Okay, welcome back. Audience, once again, just as a reminder to call in to 803-1520 with your questions or comments about cohabitation versus marriage, or as a prelude to marriage. Welcome back, everybody. And we were talking about some of the financial implications that face couples when they cohabitate versus getting married. And, one of the statistics that shows 48% of women who move in with a man as their first union before marriage, 40% of that 48 do become married. 32% of that 48 stay cohabitated. And then 27% of those that do marry do get divorced or break up. So we have some studies, and that's one study, and there's a number of studies out there. But we were talking about some of the pros and cons about getting married versus just cohabitating. And another study is showing that some of the pros for cohabitating says that finances are taken care of. And by that they mean that living separately, you're used to paying separate bills. One of the primary advantages of a live-in relationship is that you can share the household expenses, electricity, grocery bills, la 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 la. If you're planning on moving in together, you may want to go right ahead and reduce the financial pressure by living in a common space. What do you think of that?
It sounds like having a roommate, doesn't it?
Kind of, sorta.
What I would, one of the major issues that seems to come up with couples that I've had interactions with where they've lived together first, gotten married, and during that time that they've lived together, they made some pretty permanent, expensive financial decisions like purchasing a house. Tim, what do you tell people if they're in that portion of the relationship where they're potentially thinking of getting married or they're not sure, but they want to go ahead and buy a house because it makes more sense for them financially for tax purposes and things? Because I know I have my own opinion about that legally on what happens when they're trying to unwind the relationship through divorce. But what do you tell people?
Well, I first of all, I'll listen to them and see what their intentions are there, I guess. And it's difficult to dissuade them from buying a house if that's what they want to do. The problem is that when you have to unwind that, if you have to unwind it, it's like unwinding a bad business partnership. You know, there can be acrimony on both sides. There can be litigation. There can be, whereas it's if they're holding it joint with right of survivorship, you know, how you title the house makes a difference. But would I advise them to wait until they get married to buy the house? That's a difficult thing for me to do.
Well, I can tell you that from my perspective, when I see these couples coming in and they're in the midst of a divorce, the problem usually comes in when they lived together and one of them had good credit, the other had bad credit. So they put the house in the name of the person with the good credit.
For better interest rate.
For better interest rate, for the ability to actually purchase the property. And they never then transferred the deed into both names because they never thought to do that. So the person who has been continuing to contribute to the mortgage payments and to the utility payments and to everything that makes the house a home feels like that is his or her home. But then when they divorce, if the property is purchased before marriage, legally that's called separate property.
Correct.
It's property outside of the marital estate,
Right.
and you're not entitled to any part of that property
no.
as part of your divorce. You've just made a gift.
That's a whole separate problem. They may feel like it's their home, but it certainly is not.
Exactly.
And the person who owns the home has no obligation whatsoever to recompense them for what they put into the house.
Exactly. And unless the person who's in title is going to be a decent person and will agree to include that property as part of the divorce proceedings, it really isn't.
And breakups are usually not where the finest, most noble instincts of people come to the fore. Yeah.
Not usually the time that
No.
we are our most
At our
gracious
best.
selves. Yes, yes. So what you're saying, Christina, is that even if a couple that's not married purchases a house together and they both put in, let's say they put in $10,000 each,
Yes.
but they put the mortgage in the one person who has better credit. They put the mortgage in that person's name. They have to then gift that money to that other person as part of the down payment. Does that show as proof of anything that, hey, I put $10,000 into this house?
Well, what really matters here is how they take title to the house.
Okay.
If they're not married and they jointly purchase the house, that means that their names are jointly on the deed, their names are jointly on the mortgage, and they take title as, let's say, tenants in common, which means that they've designated a percentage that they each own that house in. That's what really rules how they're going to divide that house up, either at a sale or at a partition between the two of them.
Okay.
If they own the property jointly, so that their names go on the deed as tenants, joint tenants, then the mortgage has to go in both names. The bank is not going to allow someone's name to be on a deed if it's not also on the mortgage because they want to protect their interest. So if they're joint tenants, they're protected even though they're not married yet. The problem is when the deed and the mortgage is only in one person's name because the other person had bad or no credit, which would mean that that person has the mortgage in their name, the deed is in his or her name only. And any money that the other person is contributing thereafter becomes a gift to the person who's entitled. And any money that that person gave to the purchaser is really a gift. It doesn't entitle them as part of the divorce to any part of that property.
So what would what would help them in this instance? Are people doing prenuptials where as they're getting into this committed relationship that isn't legally bound by marriage? Can they put something in a document that says, hey, look, we both put this in to the pot, and if we should separate, and I know that the best intentions are that we're never going to separate. You know, when we fall in love, when we have this honeymoon phase, this is never going to happen to us. And I really truly believe that the majority of people who do walk down the aisle are not saying to themselves, if this doesn't work out, I can bolt. And I don't know if you're seeing a high percentage of prenuptial agreements before people marry as a means of protecting their assets.
I actually see a very low percentage of prenuptial agreements because I think the perception in the general community is that it's only appropriate for very wealthy people or people who are entering into second marriages and have children to protect. And of course, those are very valid reasons to have prenuptial agreements, but beyond that, there's this feeling, from what I've seen, that a prenuptial agreement signals an exit strategy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are hesitant to even discuss a prenuptial agreement with their prospective spouse because they don't want the other person to think that they're planning their exit strategy. Now, as to how they can protect themselves if they purchase a house together prior to marriage, banks don't want to hear this, but you could simply transfer the deed from yourself to yourself and the other person and put that person in title. Mm-hmm. And now that person is entitled to the property. Or post-marriage, you could refinance the mortgage and then have the deed reflect both names. Mm-hmm. Or, of course, you could do a prenuptial agreement.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see that being done sometimes with children. Children are going away to school and their parents are purchasing them a duplex, let's say, but also putting their child's name on the deed, even though the mortgage is being paid by the parent, so that their children have some kind of protection. Is that what you're referring to when you say then transfer the deed?
Yes, but that would have to be done after the closing on the purchase of the property because,
Correct.
Again, the bank is not going to be happy with that. They're not going to want somebody entitled to the property that they can't then legally go after if the mortgage is not paid.
Correct.
And Christine, I'm going to defer to you on this, but there are some issues that come up here as a planner that would concern me. If if people are owning a house, if one partner owns the house and there's a prenup that says something different, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, would be a very difficult situation. If the partnership unwinds, for one partner to try to claim half of the house on the basis of a prenup, I think would be difficult. Secondly, if there are tenants in common and the partnership unwinds, then you end up in a situation where you may have to trace where the funds came from, when they were deposited, if there were gifts, they need to be documented, and so forth. So I think people, what I would be afraid of here if these were my clients, is that they are under the misimpression that they have more legal protection than they might if the whole thing comes apart.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the concern, and that's the problem that I see when people come in and they've purchased property together before they were married.
Right.
It's difficult to unwind.
Right, because titling is everything, as
Yes.
you know.
So really the smartest thing to do would be to own the property jointly.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to purchase property prior to marriage, they should both be on the deed. They should own it as joint tenants with right of survivorship.
Correct. I mean, that demonstrates a level of commitment that owning the house individually or even as tenants in common really doesn't.
That's correct.
So,
Right. But that assumes that they both have good credit and that they can obtain a mortgage in both of their names.
well, and that can be a problem too, as people find out that they may have inherited their spouse's bad credit.
Yes.
And not something you're looking for.
None of us want that.
No.
Well, and then that brings up another point is what if somebody doesn't have good credit? What if you're in a partnership and someone doesn't have good credit? I think that, and unfortunately, that's been happening more and more today, probably in the last 10 years more than anything, is how much are you willing to take on, how much of that burden, that financial burden, are you willing to take on for your partner? And, in the days of, I know we were talking earlier about the traditional relationship where dad is out there working and mom is staying home. And some of the reasons that marriage even exists in the first place is the protection of that partner who is staying home, taking care of the children. But, for those people who are deciding to either live together or get married, is how much are you willing to subsidize your partner? Are you willing to take somebody in who maybe doesn't have that better credit rating, somebody who maybe is in between jobs, somebody who is not making the same kind of income that you are making? What are the planning stages that are going on here? Approaching marriage as a business, I think I kind of heard that, and I've even said that, is that there's a partnership in that marriage, a financial partnership. But if I'm going to take on more of the financial responsibilities, for how long am I going to take on more of the financial responsibilities? What am I going to pay for? Are you going to pay for this? Are we going to pay for half of the mortgage, half of the rent? How are we going to show that, I guess, out of each our checking accounts? And the other, just from an emotional perspective, which I know you can't address, is how are you going to feel about that 2 or 3 years down the road if that person is still in between jobs, or we haven't refinanced and now it's in both our names, and I'm still subsidizing you?
Well, that again takes me back to the old-fashioned traditionalist idea of courtship, because I think that's really what courtship should be. It should be an opportunity to get to know the person, not just as the dreamy romantic partner, but get to know what the person's feeling is on money, how they manage money or don't manage money, and get to know all of those parts of the person that down the road become a problem. When I have women come to me and say, he's not contributing to the household expenses because he can't keep a job. And sometimes people move in too quickly to those relationships if they didn't move into it together and took the time to get to know each other a little bit better. Maybe some of that could be avoided.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Dwayne in Buffalo. Dwayne, you're on the air. Good morning.
Yes, okay. Good morning to you. How you doing?
I'm well. How about you?
I'm great. The question that I have is this. What happens when your partner is making a significant amount more money? Okay, you were starting to hit on it, but I think a lot of times what I see is that when a partner makes a significant amount more, and particularly if it's a male, a lot of women feel differently. Well, this is what you're supposed to do. You are supposed to take care of the household. You are supposed to do this. I think when it goes the other way, women aren't as patient. Okay, if the man is not working, women are not ready to hear that as readily and do the same things that some men would do if the shoe is on the opposite foot. And I'm not talking about if you have kids or anything like that. I'm talking if you're just getting together, no kids involved or anything like that. I find the obligations change.
Okay, thank you for that opinion, because I think that addresses a lot of what we're kind of talking about today with not just does marriage protect you from some of that, but that's really more of an emotional question too. I think that what are the traditional roles? If the man traditionally makes more money, and so when the couple gets together, he is to continue to make that amount of money. And when he doesn't, is that an emotional issue now that becomes a problem in the relationship? And I see that. I'm sure you probably see that as well.
I do. And interestingly, I've had a number of women over the years who've come in with a major complaint that their husband either never contributed to the household expenses or has failed to contribute to the household expenses for a period of time, and it's become unbearable for that woman to continue in the relationship. Interestingly, I've never really seen the reverse, where a man comes in with the chief complaint as the basis for the divorce that his wife doesn't make enough money. But a woman complaining that her husband doesn't make enough money does seem to make its way into a reason as to why she no longer wants to be in the relationship.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think men have traditionally carried that load. I think that's just the way it has been. Either women haven't been earning an income, or they've as they were raising children, they were going out and they were doing little things, maybe part-time jobs, et cetera, so they could be home to take care of their children. But and males predominantly had some of the higher level educational degrees, so they were able to go out and make more of an income, and also because it was just part of their upbringing. I think men, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but I don't think most males grew up with the idea that someday they may have a choice of working or staying home and taking care of the family. I mean,
we never thought of that as a choice. No.
Okay.
Speaking for I can't speak for all men, obviously, but I think one of the points that Dwayne raised there is worth looking at, though, where when people are coming together as a non-married partnership, how do you contribute to the household? Does one person put in more than the other? Do they put in equal percentages of their income? And in the expectation that the man, regardless of income, should be putting in a bigger percentage of household expenses probably does come from some old traditional way of viewing marriage. Mm-hmm. And that may not be appropriate in the cases. I forget what the numbers are, but there's something like 40% of the marriages right now, the woman earns more than the man. So,
in fact, wasn't there some statistic that came out recently that there are both spouses working in a relationship, that are in a married relationship, that the households where the woman earns the higher income is more successful for some reason, which doesn't really make sense.
Interesting, yeah. There was a recent study at a major university, and I can't remember exactly what it said. Our researchers, I'm sure, will come up with that for next week.
I do think that in light of that with the higher education for women, I think that we're more likely to maybe look at marriage a little bit different than at one particular time when we were growing up in. Well, I know we've shared this. I grew up in an Italian Catholic household where it was, if you went to college, that's fine, but you went to college to look for a husband.
And I grew up in the same house as you did, apparently.
We'll compare notes. Yeah, I think that's not uncommon for women in our generation. I don't think that's so common for women today. And they're going beyond their bachelor's degrees. So now they're going to be at a level where they may meet professional people from all over the world, where it used to be, at least again, when I was growing up, it was people in your neighborhood.
Right.
Those are the people that you're going to meet. Dwayne, thank you for your phone call. And audience, we'd like to encourage you to call in to 803-1520. Log into facebook.com/creativerelationshipcenter.com or check out our website at creativerelationshipcenter.com, and we will be right back.
Do you have problems with issues like anxiety, stress management, relationships, or trauma, but want to go beyond pharmaceutical fixes? Then turn to Western New York Holistic Counseling. Leslie Martin is a licensed mental health counselor who takes a whole-person approach to therapy. She works with adults, adolescents, and families and draws in your strengths, positive qualities, and inner resilience. This holistic approach helps you feel better, get back on track, and get the anxiety under control so you can live the kind of life you want to live. Learn more at WNYHolisticCounseling.com. That's WNYHolisticCounseling.com. Do you need help planning your retirement? Is your household budget something you just don't want to look at? Then maybe it's time to make an appointment with the Financial Planning Center to develop a personalized professional financial plan. The Financial Planning Center can help with financial goals and budgets of any size. If you're a middle-class investor, you will be especially happy because there are no account minimums and they take no commissions on investments. And if that's not enough, your first visit to the Financial Planning Center is absolutely free. Call 240-4304 today. That's 240-4304 for the Financial Planning Center.
Do you fight about the same things over and over? Have you thought about calling it quits? Do you need help handling a new relationship, a marriage, or just need some support getting through the stress of life without losing your marriage or your mind? Hi, it's Wendy Pegan, founder of Creative Relationship Center. Sometimes life gets out of hand, and having some support and guidance makes sense. At Creative Relationship Center, we believe that the couple is the core of every family. When we help you strengthen yourself as a couple, your children naturally make healthier choices. We offer counseling, relationship coaching, couples retreats, even classes at our new couples college. And if we can't help you stay together, We'll mediate your divorce in the privacy of our offices without expensive attorneys or court. For more information on our services, visit us at creativerelationshipcenter.com. That's creativerelationshipcenter.com. We'll keep you strong for generations to come.
You're listening to All About Love with Wendy Pegan. Call now, 803-1520. That's 803-1520.
Hey, we're back with All About Love and our panel guests. There is another research that was done on iDiva. This one is new to me by Miss Armour, and she lists a set of pros and cons regarding live-in relationships. And I just want to touch on some of those because as we have a nice grouping of people here in the studio today. Some of us are a little on the older side and some of us on the younger side. And one of the cons that came up with the living together is social criticism. And I kind of wanted to turn this over to some of my younger people in the studio today and ask you what you think about live-in relationships. And you've kind of grown up with maybe a set of parents who stayed together or divorced, I'm not sure. But you're in that age group of women 20, 25, 30, that may want to try cohabitation first. Do you see any kind of social criticism you may have to face with that, maybe from parents or friends?
Or grandmothers.
Or grandmothers.
Who think I should be married before I moved in, but it's a little late because I've already moved in.
And how's that working for you?
It's working well. I think it's a lot more progressive nowadays. That women and men, it's a lot more easygoing.
Yeah, definitely
People
is.
don't look at you so,
It's kind of the new norm.
The new normal, like
Yeah.
the article says that we were looking at. It's not so old school. No offense.
You look at me when you say
Looking at
that.
us, yeah. You're the one because you're looking at her.
Sorry.
I do think there's a huge difference between perhaps how we may look at it for ourselves and an older generation is, Tim, you happened to mention the comment about shacking up. I think that was something that my mother would have said.
Yes.
Absolutely. My grandmother forgot it.
It's a phrase you don't hear anymore.
No, it isn't. You don't hear that anymore. And I don't know if you guys have heard that at all.
I've heard it.
Yeah.
I've also heard of the horizontal bop, so
That I haven't heard.
that was my grandmother.
All right.
That's a whole nother show.
It's another show.
Well, let me list some of the pros, and you guys can feel free to jump in on how you feel about this. Some of the pros that are listed for a live-in relationship is, I love this one, you can have more sex.
It's easier.
I
You're
hear
right
snickering
there.
over there.
There's no traveling. That rainy day.
And there's no dating.
No, I don't know about that. There had better be dating.
Do you still date even though you're living together?
Yes, we have date night.
Well, so do married people.
Exactly. So,
Yeah,
you got me.
You know, I don't know if it's whether live-in or married, you can have more sex. I think the key here should be you can have safer sex, or assume that you can have safer sex. Hopefully,
Like to assume that, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember when they used to have a law that before you got a marriage license, you had to have a blood test for syphilis, right?
They don't do that anymore?
No,
No, they don't do that anymore.
Oh.
no.
No, but there was a time, and I don't know if this is still going on, there was a trend where people were requiring their prospective spouse to be tested for AIDS.
Oh, I've read about that.
And they've stopped that.
I don't hear about it so much, so I don't know if they've stopped it, but it's not really discussed as openly as it used to be.
Yeah, I
think it was a bigger taboo in the 90s, probably. Maybe in the 80s.
It seems to me that testing for AIDS after you've been living together before you get married is sort of beside the point, but
Unless you're saving yourself. I mean, that's very old school.
that could happen. So they moved in together, but they've still saved themselves for
Yeah.
the marriage.
I mean, 'cause
holding
there
out,
are
holding out.
just- There are just, wow.
First the ring, then the sex. Is
Yeah.
that how they see it? Well, Some of the other pros that are listed on here is it allows you to spend more time together. With today's very busy schedules, people not being able to connect. I hate that phrase, hook up, but people not being able to connect or hook up sometimes in a busy week because everybody's doing things, and particularly if you have children from a previous relationship. Those kids are taking you to soccer and baseball and the kinds of things that we normally do. And because you're a single parent, you don't have another person to spell you off on that. So you may be doing a lot of things on your own. And this gives you an opportunity to spend more time together. And I guess, waking up together, assuming that you're sleeping together, waking up together, going to bed together, and having some of that time. What do you guys think about spending more time together as a means of having a live-in relationship?
I think it's like doing simpler things becomes spending quality time together. Like just coming home and sitting on the couch and unwinding becomes a together event. Whereas, because that might be the only time you have together. So that time, because you do live together, is something you're doing as a couple rather than, or cleaning together, doing the dishes together, cooking together. Things that, if had you been living apart, would be basic and take you away from your partner rather than be a bonding experience. At least that's for us.
Actually, that point, I like that point because maybe not necessarily being an advocate of living together first, the thing that I like about that is that it shows that couples are doing the everyday things together as opposed to, if you're going on a date and you don't live together, then every time he comes to the house, or maybe she goes to the house to pick him up, the house is put together, it looks nice, you're all fresh and put together, getting ready to go out on a date, which is not real life. Sometimes people think that you've got it all together, you look great, and that may not be how you looked 5 minutes ago, and your house was just in total turmoil. So that is a possibility. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah. I suppose when you're living with somebody, you really get to see them at their prettiest and their ugliest.
Their ugliest.
Just as you would when you're married to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's
benefits.
I can potentially see some benefits to it. However, I think that I wonder whether when a woman has moved in with a man, if she's already emotionally connected and invested in a level that maybe the man is not, so that women are maybe more likely to overlook some things because they've already made that decision, that major move to move in together.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because that's actually someone just wrote in on Facebook that the reasons for moving in are a big determinant factor of how successful the cohabitation experience is going to be and how it's going to affect the longevity of a relationship.
Well, I'm wondering whether the man and the woman will look at that cohabitation the same way and have the same expectations of it.
I don't know if that's true. How would you?
How would I? Well,
Any ideas?
I'm again speaking
being the
as
token male here. Jim, you can
token
join
male.
in too.
I think there may be a situation where one partner looks at it as a step to marriage and the other does not. Mm-hmm. The other looks at it as a step to getting their laundry done.
Yeah, that's what the person wrote. She wrote the reason he was wanting her to move in was he needed a roommate. The reason she moved in is she needed to go back to school and couldn't afford to be. Mm-hmm. So they had different reasons.
But they're
some
both practical
logistical,
reasons.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right. And as long as those reasons come out on the table ahead of time, so there isn't any preconceived idea, that's still in the back of my mind that I haven't brought to the table. We were talking earlier about getting engaged and that theory of being a fiancé forever.
Yes. I can't tell you how many people that I've spoken to who describe their live-in girlfriend or boyfriend as my fiance.
Yes.
Is there a
With
ring?
no date.
No. Is there a date? No. Is there a plan to get married? Not at this time.
Well, oftentimes there is a ring, but there's still no date.
Maybe this is a way of keeping the grandmothers happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're working our way to that.
Yeah.
Or is it a way to get the other person to move in with you?
Mm-hmm.
That could be too. Sure.
Call the woman your fiance.
Sure, I'll be your
There's an
fiancé,
expectation.
yeah.
Sure, I'll be your fiance.
It's so ulterior motives. Yeah, it looks like you're looking
I'm
for.
sorry, it's the lawyer in me.
It's an easy excuse.
And interestingly enough, sometimes, at least I have seen in my practice, couples who are married and may not live in the same house or may actually live in separate states. And the reason for that is because they've been married before, they have children from another relationship, they met, they really wanted to be together, they committed to each other to not necessarily live together when they can, but not be in the same state because their children or their divorce decree, if they have shared custody or joint custody, precludes them from moving too far away, particularly if they have shared and they're in the same school district, so they're helping their kids get on and off the bus, and they feel as if through their divorce process, they did not want to hinder their children at all by moving outside of the school district. So now they're married to somebody else living in separate states, and that itself can bring some hardships. But at the same time, it can actually work out for them because they're not dealing with some of the things that people who live together on a day-to-day basis do deal with.
No, if it works for them, God bless them. It's kind of like perpetual dating with the security of marriage.
Yep. Well, it used to also be where one partner, generally the man, I hate to traditionally keep bringing this up, but when a man traveled a lot for work, if he was out of the house 4 days of the week, 5 days of the week, and only home on the weekends, you were on a traditional honeymoon.
Well, it's funny you should say that because as soon as you started to bring that up, I went back to my childhood. My parents had that kind of relationship. My dad worked out of town 5 days out of the week and was home for the weekends. And when he was home, it was fantastic. And we did all family things. And then on Monday morning, he would go back to work and it was out of town and he would come back on Friday.
Mm-hmm. I remember a couple where the man was about to start traveling intensively. He'd be gone pretty much every weekday. And he said to his wife, hopefully, well, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And her response was, out of sight, out of mind.
I guess that's personal.
Yes.
Well, listeners, we're going to take one more break, and we'll have time for one more phone call. I encourage you to call in at 803-1520. And you can also get us on Facebook.com/Creative Relationship Center. Also, go to our website at creativerelationshipcenter.com. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Wendy Pegan, host of All About Love here on KB Radio and founder of Creative Relationship Center. If you've been thinking to yourself, he's changed, or she's not as loving as she used to be to me, or we don't have anything in common anymore, then consider making an appointment at Creative Relationship Center. At Creative Relationship Center, we have an association of professionals in the fields of counseling, legal, and financial planning. We offer couples counseling, coaching, mediation, workshops, and classes for adults at all levels of commitment, from pre-marriage through post-marriage. Creative Relationship Center can help your family stay together. Or if you've already decided to separate, we can help mediate your differences civilly without the major expense of attorneys or stress of going to court. Consider having the relationship you've always wanted. Consider Creative Relationship Center. To learn more about our couples college, couples retreats, divorce mediation, and many other services available, go to creativerelationshipcenter.com. That's creativerelationshipcenter.com.
You're listening to All About Love with Wendy Pegan. Call now, 803-1520. That's 803-1520.
Hi, welcome back. This is Wendy from Creative Relationship Center, and we are talking about cohabitation versus marriage. And 60% of all marriages are preceded by cohabitation, and Huffington Post calls this a spousal audition. And we're talking about the legal and financial implications of, and the emotional implications of living together versus marriage, or living together first. Something that we haven't talked about is maintaining independence and also staking your claim when you move in with someone. When you move in with somebody and you're married, and you know, let's go back to the whole house situation, not to get into a lot of detail about it, but when somebody already owns a house and you move into that house as a marriage, you've got two major things, if not three things, that are affecting that couple. The first is the emotional. Is when you move into somebody else's house, how does that become your house? What do you have to do in order to make that, kind of staking the claim? I'm thinking of that one movie, I forget the name of it. Tim's got some examples here, but that movie with Oh, you guys are good with movies with Nicole Kidman, and they play Irish couple, and they're riding in the 1800s. They're riding to stake their claim, and they put the flag in the middle of the ground. This is their property. Okay, well, I can't remember the name, but nevertheless, you're staking your claim in this household. You are maybe putting up a desk, bringing in some of your things. I have couples who, for the very first time, are moving in together in their 40s. You got a household of stuff. He's got a household of stuff. How are you going to combine that stuff? Whose stuff stays? Whose memorabilia goes in a box?
This is the difference between my stuff and your junk.
Yeah.
Far and away.
Far and away. Thank you. That's awesome. God, technology.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, maintaining some of your level of independence when you move in together and when you're married, I think there needs to be the recognition that you are no longer, you've made a commitment that you're no longer living independently. So when you keep that separate apartment or that separate house, just in case anything goes wrong, you can always move back in. That's not something in a married situation that people are necessarily going to encourage. I agree with sacred space. I agree with having your own separate corners in the household. Maybe she has a place that she goes to. Maybe it's the bedroom or a home office. He has a place he goes to, which now we're seeing and labeling as the man cave. And you cool off and then you come back, but you still can maintain your levels of friendship outside the relationship, which, and some of your activities, which can help you maintain being healthy and strong as a couple. Also, one of the things we haven't talked about is your contribution in terms of chores. When you move into a household, what are your chores? You don't want to now be seen as the person who does the laundry or the person who automatically mows the lawn or the person who cleans. How are you going to divide that up? And are you going to do it when you're living together? And what happens when you get married? Does it just automatically fall into sex roles? Or is it still something that you talk about? What if you'd like to mow the lawn?
They should definitely talk about it before they get married. All of those things, especially issues related to money, which seems to be at the top of the list for reasons that I see people getting divorced. And I don't know that people talk about that enough. They really need to talk about how they feel about money, how they relate to money, what it means to them, what their stuff means to them, and how the other person feels about those things and what those things mean to the other person, so that they can then shake out a schedule of, I'm best at these things and this is what I'll take care of, you take care of those things, we come together. We should both know what the other person is doing, and we should have a working knowledge of everything going on in the household, but we can't each do everything. So you take your chores, I'll take my chores. But I don't think people do that enough, anywhere near enough.
No, probably
I don't know.
not.
I think I know we do. I feel like we have a yours, mine, and ours situation without the children. It's your space. We have 3 bedrooms. He has his room for his office. I have my extra bedroom for my office, and then we have our bedroom. That's our stuff and our space. And he, just kind of happened that way. It fell in naturally. I think that it's something that just happens. I don't know if you necessarily need to. I encourage talking about it, but I don't know if you necessarily. Some things just go without saying. If you're gonna do the dishes. Like.
Well, I think you're lucky then. I think you're lucky that it fell into place, because
Probably.
I think for a lot of people it doesn't fall into place, and they have different ideas about the way things should be, and sometimes it doesn't shake out the way they think it should.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This has been an interesting conversation. Certainly go to the website or our blogspot.com/creativerelationshipcenter.com for some interesting information on living together versus marriage. Next week, we'll be talking about ways to keep it exciting, so I'll be looking forward to seeing the research from that. Thank you very much for joining us. Tim and Christina, as always, it's a pleasure. Kate and Courtney, thank you for joining us today. And Jim, thank you once again for running that panel. And this is Wendy Pegan, Creative Relationship Center for All About Love.
You've been listening to All About Love with Wendy Pegan, relationship expert, mediator, and founder of the Creative Relationship Center, sponsored by the Financial Planning Center. Be sure to tune in next Sunday morning at 11 for more of All About Love on KB Radio 1520.
Now the latest from NBC News Radio on 50,000 watt AM 1520 WWKB Buffalo.